In the book Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, Alice encounters the Cheshire Cat, and she says, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to," said the cat. "I don't much care where," said Alice. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. "So long as I get somewhere," Alice added as an explanation. "Oh, you're sure to do that," said the cat, "if only you walk long enough." And so it is on our spiritual paths. We're sure to get somewhere, but where and how to get there is the question. Hi, it's Margaret Maloney, and welcome to Season 3 of the Death Dhamma podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so appreciative that you are part of my community. And yet, I seek not to be attached to the idea of the podcast or even to the idea of our community. And that's our topic this season: attachment, clinging, and aversion. What happens when we really want something? What happens when we really don't want something? And what does it do to our suffering and dissatisfaction? Let's dive in and find out a little bit more with today's episode. The exchange between Alice and the cat can be distilled into this quote from Lewis Carroll: "If you don't know where you are going, any road will take you there. But what if you do know where you are going or where you want to go? Is there more than one path?" Some spiritual leaders would dissent, and they will teach you what they have experienced as the one true path. And it is a good idea to pick a path and a teacher. But that does not mean that you cannot learn from the wisdom of others. Today we learn from Mike Sanders as he generously shares with us the 4 challenges we will face on our journeys if we choose to do the work, and some tips on how to do the work with these challenges in our lives every day. Everybody, welcome. Today, I'm catching up with someone that I haven't had the opportunity to speak with for a while, and Michael Sanders. And we actually have worked together in our professional lives. And it just so happens that in our personal lives, we like to work with all of you to help you find more peace and less suffering in your lives. And I guess I would say we come at it from some different perspectives. And before I started recording us, we were both saying it's interesting because there are these different paths we can all take, but they're trying to help us maybe with the same things, but in different ways. And so, me through Buddhism, and Mike being a shaman and coming to us with Native American Indian practices. And so he's here today to share a story and some thoughts around attachment from that perspective. And so, Mike, thanks so much for being here, and it's nice to reconnect.
Thank you.
Of course. And maybe you can elaborate. I think it would be nice if you told people a little bit more about yourself than what I just said.
I grew up fairly poor in a very rural area, and my sister and I were our best friends. But it was a little scary, and I remember feeling a presence in my room at night, and we were afraid because we lived between, like a junkyard and a liquor store, and we never knew what was going to happen. But I felt protected, and I wasn't ever sure why. But as I grew up, my dad told us about his Native American heritage. He was Cherokee, and before he died, he went back to Oklahoma and he signed up my sister and I, registered us, my sister and I, as Cherokee because our grandfather was Cherokee.
Mm-hmm.
And after he passed, in honor of him, I decided to investigate Native American practices. And so I did so, and out of just honoring my father.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and so I started investigating it, but it was a trip to Boeing in the 90s where in Seattle, where my companions decided to go out to dinner, but I decided to go into Pioneer Square in a used bookstore and just look for books.
Mm-hmm.
And there was these used books, and they were all crumpled up, and they were in no order. And I was just going through them, and I found a book, a paperback for 50 cents called "How to Be a Shaman."
Oh, wow.
And I read it, and it really resonated with me. And I started doing practices that were discussed in that book, and they were resonating. I felt it felt good.
Okay.
And so I kept going with that, and I was volunteering at the Southern California Indian Center in Orange County, and I was helping tutor young Indian boys and girls, helping with powwows and something. But I was never really accepted because I don't look like a Native American, you know. So
Right.
they saw me as maybe an interloper to some extent. So I went off on my own and started investigating it around the country. And I became trained in Native American practice by the Four Winds Society down El Capitan. We took some time, several days. And then I had an interesting experience with a Peruvian shaman in that exercise that shook me. And continued practicing until a couple of years ago, where I went deeper and did a 6-month apprenticeship with some Chilean shamans,
Mm-hmm.
and learned even more. And at the end of all that training, at the end of everything, where we had these intricate ceremonies and practices, and we practiced on each other, and it was deeply involving for 6 months. At the end of it, I threw it all away. Realized that what we all need to do is develop our own dream. Everybody's got their own dream, and we need to do it. But it gave me the confidence to do that. So after all that training, after all these years, I dumped it all and created my own ceremonies, my own practices, and those resonate with me. And that's where I'm at today.
I think that's beautiful. And that in itself is a lesson in attachment and non-attachment.
Right. Yeah.
Is, we learn these things. And I think when we come to a practice new, I don't know about you, but when I came to it new, I was like, I have to believe everything. I have to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I didn't get to do a 6-month intensive like you, but I will say in some ways, some days I'm like, not so much. Maybe there are some things that aren't quite right for me, but maybe I'm still going to be okay. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things you sent me, I don't know if you still want to talk about it or not, was a story about the 2 eggs. There was a story about the 2 eggs.
Right. Well, one of the pathways that I've learned to wisdom is to go through 4 challenges. And the first challenge I think we face as humans is to overcome fear.
Okay.
To live in fear is to live in the dark. We need to act in spite of our fear, not to ignore it. But acting with fear exhibits true courage and awareness. And fear is a valuable companion, a true friend, not a debilitating enemy. So fear should not drive us, but act as our co-pilot by our side. And by mastering fear, we then acquire something we can call clarity. We can see better. Okay. But the newfound clarity brings our second challenge. We need to realize that although we may now see things much clearer and better, we must still question this new vision continually to validate what we really see. Our presumed clarity can be quite deceiving. Without validation, we can act in ignorance and wishful thinking, and this can be debilitating. So once we master clarity, find out the practice of validating our clear view, we gain power. But we need to use our newly acquired power wisely, knowing how to use power intelligently with compassion and selfishness. Why? Because the selfish and greedy use of power misguides, corrupts, and destroys its host, you and I. So once we have mastered the proper and prudent use of power, we arrive at the doorsteps of our final and most difficult challenge. The final gateway to find true wisdom is to acknowledge and accept our own death. To recognize that someday we will die and all those around us will die. With this acceptance, we can then properly set our priorities and act accordingly. And without the acknowledgement and acceptance of our own mortality, we can act blindly, holding on to like a skewed view of the world and hiding in denial and unhappiness and finally fear, right where we started. So once we've mastered these 4 challenges, we've satisfied the requisites for true wisdom. But know these challenges must be overcome every day, every hour, every minute, as each second of time stands on its own.
You mean I don't just permanently get to a place where I'm just gone through the gateways and I'm okay and I don't have to revisit the work?
No.
Really?
No.
Oh, I have to keep working.
No, we gotta keep doing it. And so I wanted to mention another thing about wisdom, and it focuses around the dream, the concept of the dream. The ancient Toltecs were intellectual and cultural predecessors of the Aztecs. It's about 1000 AD. when they were in prominence. They believed that when you sleep, you dream, and when you awaken, you keep dreaming. The Five Agreements, many may be familiar with the book, The Five Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, based on ancient Toltec wisdom. The first agreement, be impeccable with your word, speak with integrity, say what you mean, avoid using words to speak against yourself or about others, use the power of your words in the direction of truth, love, and compassion, and forgiveness. The second agreement, don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. So when you are immune to these opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. And then the third agreement, don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and express what you really want. Communicate with others clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. With this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. The fourth agreement, always do your best. Doing your best is going to change from one moment to the next. It'll be different when you are tired as opposed to when you're rested, but simply do your best and you'll avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. And the fifth agreement, be skeptical, but learn to listen. That agreement is don't believe yourself or anybody else unconditionally. This is the clarity thing we were talking about earlier. Use the power of doubt to question everything you hear. What is really the truth? Listen to the intent behind the words and you will understand the real message. And by practicing these agreements, you're respecting everything in creation, your dream, everyone else's dream. So it's dream-based. So that leads us to the tale of two eggs.
Okay. Before you go on, I just want to thank you for bringing that, because as you're talking about the five agreements, I'm just going to quickly say that once upon a time, several years ago, I was in a leadership class and we had this good reading, but the reading was coming from a genre that didn't resonate with me. And I was really nervous. And I went up to the instructor and I said, do you have something that isn't based in this other system that I don't resonate with? And he told me to read. It was then at that time he started me with the four agreements, and it was life-changing. At the time, it was, he just started me with the four, and it was life-changing. But I will tell you, in that moment, I was so afraid because I thought this man was going to yell at me for not being one of them, one of a certain group of people, because I was not. And he wasn't. He just said, oh, you should use this. And then, so I'm so glad you brought that. Thank you so much.
Well, let's invent the sixth agreement.
What's that?
That we will be comfortable and accept our own death. How about that? Sixth agreement.
Yes, I love that. So thank you. And
we should recommend that to Don Miguel.
Yes, let's do that. Well, he's, you can find him at least I know you can find him, and you can definitely find his son online on social media.
Yes,
so probably could.
His son, yes, right.
Yes.
I'll tell the story of the two eggs, but it's deeper than that, obviously. But Native Americans preserve their history, celebrate legends, and teach through storytelling. And here's one such story. We make important decisions daily based on what we consider to be the truth. The truth is based on what we perceived as rules of the game. But what if our view was incorrect? Our decisions could be flawed. For thousands of years, Native American shamans have performed many healing roles for their people. One of these is called soul retrieval. Their belief is when a person is faced with a deep tragedy, harm, or significant emotional event, pieces of them, their soul, can leave their body and find safety elsewhere. Unattended, this person could live the rest of their lives unhappy and incomplete, with parts of their selves literally missing. Shamans heal this by traveling to another world to find these missing soul pieces and return them to their owner. One day, a powerful shaman agreed to perform a soul retrieval for a dear friend. To do this, he had to travel to another world and overcome many challenges and hardships to find his friend's missing soul pieces. When he completed this task, the shaman began the long journey back to the earth world. However, finding dangerous adversaries and navigating through treacherous terrain was no match for his final challenge. At the end of his trek, the shaman came to a great portal, the entry back to the earth world. The door was closed. The front of this portal was a deep precipice. Peering down at its massive drop, the shaman could see no end. Sitting at the edge of the precipice was an altar, the key to opening the great portal. On top of the altar were two golden eggs. One egg was very beautiful, laced with many jewels. The other egg was plain and a bit smaller than the other. In front of the egg was a sign that read, "Take an egg, but take just one." The shaman, trained to decipher symbols and an adept at solving riddles, was nevertheless perplexed by this warning on the sign. If he took the beautiful egg, the great portal might judge him as egotistical and greedy and deny him entry. If he selected the plain egg, the portal might view him as unworthy, lacking in confidence and self-esteem, and deny him entry as well. So what should he do? When in an impasse, a shaman is trained to ask questions. So he asked the eggs, "Which one of you shall I take?" He waited in silence for over an hour, but there was no reply. Frustrated, the shaman then asked the altar, "Which egg shall I take?" Alas, another hour passed in total silence. At his wits' now, he called for his great spirit guide, Greyhawk, to help him. Soon the majestic bird appeared overhead and began circling high in the sky. The shaman asked his hawk, "Which egg shall I take?" The sign says, "Take an egg, but just one. If I take the beautiful egg, the portal may think I am egotistical and greedy and deny me entry to the earth world. But if I select the plain egg, the portal may see me as unworthy, lacking in confidence and self-esteem, and deny me entry as well. What should I do?" Yet another hour passed in silence as Greyhawk flew in wide circles overhead. Now discouraged, the shaman sat down in front of the altar, hung his head, and stared at the ground. At that very moment, Greyhawk swooped down, landed on his shoulder, and whispered into his ear, "Your dream, your rules," and then quickly flew away and out of sight. The shaman thought for a while on these words and then suddenly smiled. He stood up, walked to the front of the altar, picked up the sign, tore it in half, and took both eggs. The great portal opened.
Aha.
The story of the shaman's journey is really our journey. It's not about greed or living in self-centered existences, and it's not about ignoring rules. It's about rightfully removing self-imposed limitations. It's also about becoming complete and living the rich lives we truly deserve. In business, we rightfully value rules and give high regard to those who follow them. However, the key is to know the difference between those which are real and those which are self-imposed. In a way, we are all shamans. We journey through life dealing with adversaries and traveling through treacherous terrain while making key decisions along the way. In wisdom and in spite of our fears, we need to be ready and have the courage to tear in half some of the signs we encounter along the way, the useless ones created a long time ago that have lost their relevance. In this act of courage, we piece ourselves back together and become stronger. And in this strength, we are better able to experience life's ornate beauty as well as its unadorned simplicity, both eggs.
That is such a great story. Thank you so much. So many thoughts, especially, since you started us talking about the 5 agreements and, how some of that when he teaches us those agreements, part of it is remembering, like, we've been conditioned with some false things that we might carry around. And so one of the first things that pops up to me is, like, I know there have been times in my life where I had this soundtrack, right? Margaret, you have to do this. You can't do that. You must make this decision. And I can't say I've always broken free of that, because I'm just sitting here a person, not a fully enlightened person. But there have been times where I did question. I was like, why? Who said you had to do that? You don't have to do that.
Yeah. In the shaman way, we do things like cutting cords, things, or breaking contracts that are no longer valid.
Yes.
Breaking a contract, we break this. And in order to make it real, you can write it down. You can write it down, or you can say it out loud. You can ask your spirit guides for help, or whomever, your great spirit or God, or whomever, for help in breaking this contract that's no longer valid. It's amazing. But in order to do that, we have to first acknowledge that we have them. And so some self-introspection is important to think about what we're doing. Does it make sense? Why are we doing this? I mean, have you ever had an occasion where you've done something or said something and you thought, why did I do that?
Yes.
I didn't want to say that. Or why didn't I say something when I should have?
I think I'm at the point now where I have more of why didn't I? But I do still have some of that what were you thinking moments. But I think I'm starting to be more of that, why didn't you do this? but
And
it's still a challenge.
so we should do the work. When we have occasions where we say, why didn't I do something? Or why didn't I say something? Or why did I say something? Why did I do something? We should make note of it and investigate it, look into it. And it's hard work. And guess what? It's uncomfortable.
Yes, it is.
But the hard work and the uncomfortable work is the most important work we can do.
It is.
And if you're still at odds, ask a trusted friend. I'm doing this all the time. What do you think? Or am I doing this? Am I imagining it? Is it really happening? And get some feedback and then improve. So I see this as a constant cycle of improvement, peeling away one layer at a time. And it's maybe never ending, and that's fine. That's our journey here. That's why we're here, to be better. So it's a pleasure to do the work, but it's hard. Sometimes it's like peeling skin. It's a very difficult, but it's worth it.
I appreciate that peeling skin analogy because, I could go to the obvious layers of an onion, but that doesn't communicate the challenge and the depth and you're right. And it is painful. Right. And so if you cut yourself with a razor or, you have some kind of a scrape and your skin comes off, it hurts.
It hurts.
But you do heal.
Why am I doing this? I mean, it's so much easier just to chill out and coast. Why am I doing this? But it's worth it. I used to give a talk on something I called advanced multitasking. And I created that, and it was bigger than advanced multitasking. It was about organizing your life and asking the three main questions. Who am I? What do I want? How do I get it? But at the end of that talk, typically there would be some young folks coming up to me and they would say, what's next? Okay, what's next?
Oh, okay.
And many of them I mentored, for free. I just took them under my wing and I helped them. We talked about their life and their life direction. And one of my mentees in particular was always ill. Oh. He always had a cold or the flu or something. And he would, at 10 minutes before our meetings, cancel because he had something else. So I fired him. I said, okay,
and that's appropriate because he wasn't either ready or something.
Yeah.
What happened when you fired him?
But he was just astonished. I mean, a mentor fired me. And then he would come back a few months later and says, can I come back? And I said, well, are you going to do this and that? And he'd say, yes. And he came back. And this happened twice, where he came back and I fired him twice. I fired him again. And then the third time he came back, and I'm forgiving. And I would say, are you willing to change? Because my time is valuable. You can't cancel the 10 minutes. I've scheduled this time. You need to do. He said, yes. And he followed through on that one. And we went through the program of self-realization, the program of investigating why you're doing this, why am I compelled, and so on. And today, I have to tell you, he's very successful director. And he went from an employee that was just getting shoveled stuff to becoming a powerful force and a mentor himself. And so you don't give up on people. And everybody was at that place at some point in their life where they're maybe a little flaky or what have you, but you don't give up on people and you keep working on this. And by the way, working with him, mentoring him helped me. I improved. So it's all good. What you give is what you get back.
Really appreciate that perspective and that story. In it, there's so much. And part of it, I feel, is boundaries. Like you kept your heart and your mind open to this person, but you also respected yourself and set some boundaries and saying like, I will help you, but here's the door you need to walk through. And if you walk through this door, I will meet you on the other side.
Yeah. When I'm working with someone, Margaret, the first thing I do is I give them homework.
Okay. And what is the homework?
Because that locks them in, and that means that they're invested, that they're willing to help themselves. And if they don't do the homework, then I'm thinking, well, maybe they're not as committed, and then we'll do it some other time. But I always dish out things to do.
Oh, that's so smart. That's so smart. Now, would you be willing to share one or two of the steps that you used when this young man was ready to walk through the door and really walk through the door? What were some of the steps you used to get him going in the direction?
Well, one of the things was, let's say he had an issue with someone. Let's say someone was his enemy. He felt it was enemy. my 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 instruction would be do something out of friendship.
Okay.
Do a friendly act. If he was walking around all the time with a frown on his face, I said, I want you to go through an entire day smiling at everybody. And we would be on a Zoom call, and I would see he's not smiling. I said, you're not smiling at me, And so we make him smile. And then one day I had him go through the entire day without saying a word, only listening to others. And he would have to write things down on a pad if he wanted to communicate. Things like that. Instead of, I asked him to take walks and go out and not look at things, but look at the shadow that things cast. Look at shadows. Like instead of the leaves on a tree, look at the shadows on the tree. Then I asked him to eat virtual meals where you actually eat a whole meal virtually. Imagine it and eat it one bite at a time. So changing where your mind is at, because we tend to, we're at default in our emotional brain during the day, our limbic system. That's our default brain. The only problem with that is that default brain is 6 years old. Yeah. It's a 6-year-old. Yes. So most of the people, Margaret, that you and I talk to during the day are 6-year-olds, no matter how big they are, no matter how many syllables they use in words. They're basically emotional 6-year-olds, and you have to understand that. So to get into your prefrontal cortex, into your higher brain, you have to want to go there. You have to do something to go there. That's what meditation will do. Visualization will do that. But anything that you can do to get into your higher brain, where you can really, that's where the action is. That's where you can, that's where you're in communication with your spirit guides, your higher self, your virtualization, your planning, your long-term thinking. That's where and you need to want to go there. So we practiced exercises that would take him there. And he suddenly stopped being sick.
Oh, he
wasn't ill anymore, because he was causing the illness from his own thinking. So our subconscious is extremely powerful. By these messages that our brain is sending and by us accepting them, we're communicating with our subconscious through our conscious mind. And to give you an idea, our conscious mind processes about between 25 and 40 bits of information per second. Our conscious mind. Our subconscious mind processes 11 million bits of information per second. It's a supercomputer we're sitting on top of. Think of if you could access that supercomputer. You can do that through affirmations. It soaks in over time. Affirming what you want, the idea of law of attraction deals with that. That by affirming it, by visualizing, by seeing it, it soaks into your subconscious, and your subconscious says, okay, that's what you want. I'll make it happen. And it's amazing what can happen there. So that's what happens when you think differently. Yeah.
I love that. That is really helpful. And I can see how these different activities are taking us away from our normal way of thinking. For example, looking at the shadows of the leaves, not just the leaves. The virtual meal, I see how that would really take me out of myself. And that's really
one of the last exercises is a cold shower.
Ooh, okay.
And I lost a lot of people in that one when we do workshops. But a cold shower infuses your body with dopamine and endorphins, and it will last for hours, and it's healthy, and so it improves your biochemistry. Cold showers, as well as it's after you've done it for a while, it becomes a fun thing. It's not fun in the beginning. I started my cold showers one day as an experiment, and I screamed.
Did you scream the whole time? Why am I doing this?
But I did it a second time. The second night I decided I'm going to do it again. And then I did it for 70 straight days, cold showers.
Okay.
And it changed me. It just changed me. I became more confident. I became healthier. I could see clearer. I was happier for sure. And it did start out as something that seemed like it would take you there, but it does. So that's another exercise in our 21-day challenge program that we do. And he went through that program twice. This one mentee I was talking about, it really helped him. It really helped him a lot.
That's wonderful. And also, I will say the cold shower routine, also better for the environment. So there's that.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Better for the environment. That is amazing.
And you know what? It's funny because in a cold shower, you don't stay in as long either. You use less water.
Yeah. So I'm not going to use as much water, and I'm not going to use the energy that is needed to heat that water.
Right.
It sounds like, and I'm going to be better off afterwards. So win, win, win. But
Yeah.
I can see where it's difficult, because as I'm saying that to you, I'm not thinking like, oh, that sounds really easy. I'm thinking I would like to try that, and recognizing that it will be challenging for me. Definitely.
Another Stoic philosophy that we teach, and I teach my mentees, is an ancient concept called amor fati. It's Latin. It's a Stoic philosophy, and it means amor fati means love, amor fati, fate. Be in love with your fate, meaning whatever comes your way, accept it like you asked for it, and deal with it on that level. Accept it like you wanted it, and deal with it on that level. And the Stoic said, when people criticize them, the Stoic says, well, what are you going to do anyway? By rejecting it, doesn't change it. So accept it. And how many times have we had things happen to us that we thought were bad, and they ended up being a blessing? Like leaving a job, I was laid off once, and I got a much better job as a result of that, much happier.
Yes.
So love your fate. That's another.
Yes. I like that. I love that. I don't say it as eloquently, but sometimes I'll say, you need to live the life you're given. And I mean, really live it. Like, I don't just mean like, oh, this is what's happening to you. I mean, live the life you're given.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Another challenge that we had is we call opposite day.
Oh, okay.
You do everything just the opposite of what you normally do. For instance, if you tie your shoes on the right first, tie your shoes on the left. If you take a shower in the morning, take a shower in the evening. If you drive to work a certain way, drive to work differently. If you go in a certain door, go in differently. If you typically don't speak to a person, speak to the person. And then do everything opposite all day long, and see what kind of reaction you get from others and also yourself.
Oh, I can picture that, because I sometimes can be a creature of habit. And so I can see where, like, in a way that would throw me off balance, but there's value to being a little off balance, right? Because maybe that's where some of my more creative ideas and things will come from, is in that area of discomfort, because I would be uncomfortable. Absolutely.
Yeah. I remember in the Carlos Castaneda books, Don Juan, who was his mentor, his shaman mentor, said to Carlos once, he would come by every few weeks to see him. And he said, this time I want you to go, and I want you every day, I want you to tie your shoes. When do you normally tie your shoes on the right? Yes. Tie your shoes on the left every day for 6 weeks. And he said, okay. So he goes away, ties his shoes on the left for 6 weeks, and he comes back and he meets Don Juan. He says, okay, I tied my shoes on the left for 6 weeks. What do I get? And he says, nothing.
Nothing.
I just want you to be used to doing things for no reason, for getting nothing back. Just practice that, because it's not always a quid pro quo. Sometimes you do things and you don't see what you're going to get right away. Be used to that, just doing it for the sake of doing it. And that's when he said the word, it's easy for people to believe when they believe. The hard thing is to believe when you don't believe. That's the hard part, and that's what we have to master. And so there's a truth in that too.
When we don't see the results, and so like in Buddhism, like karma, like sometimes I know some of my friends will say, well, why is nothing bad happening to that person? And it's like, you don't know. And also, one, we don't want to walk around wishing anything difficult to anyone, because we're all going to have difficulties, and we don't want to wish them on one another. And also, we don't know.
No.
Right. So like, we don't always see, we don't know when we're going to see the effects of our actions.
No.
I trust that I will. And so there's an element of faith, and sometimes people don't, sometimes the word faith isn't very popular, but I'll use it anyway. And there's an element of faith.
Right.
In any of our belief systems, there's going to be things that we maybe can't prove, or we're not going to see. Maybe trust is another good word to use, but I trust that it's going to be true.
Yeah. And then finally, every day for me, when I get up, the first thing I try to remember and say is memento mori, meaning remember that someday I will die. That's Latin. That's another Stoic phrase. And then the day is framed much richer. This could be the last day I have on earth. I want to live it to its fullest. It's a richer way to live.
Yeah. Am I doing what I could be doing? Am I doing the best with this time? Right? Am I doing? Yeah, that is beautiful. Well, I am so happy to catch up with you. And I know that what you're sharing is going to be so helpful to everyone. But before I say goodbye, I just want to check in and see if there's anything else you would like to say or add?
Well, I'm here because I want to support your work, Margaret. I think it's beautiful work. It's not a popular subject, particularly in the Western side of the hemisphere.
You're right.
Dealing with death, dealing with
Mhm.
our eventual passing. But the message that I was hoping to bring today was that we are in a dream. It's our dream.
Mhm.
Our dream will live on, even though this vehicle called a body may go back to its original place in the earth someday. We live on
Mhm.
in our spirit, and to just remember that and to make the most of every day that we have.
That
That's
is
it.
perfect. Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you. That
welcome.
is amazing. Thank you so much.
I would love to hear from you, your thoughts, your suggestions, your own stories about attachment. So follow this link, I'm going to read it to you in a minute here, to leave me a 90-second message with your ideas and suggestions. You can go to https://www.speakpipe.com/death_Dhamma_podcast. I suppose you could also just use your favorite search engine to say SpeakPipe Death Dhamma Podcast. And there you can record an audio message for me. And be sure to come over to margaretmaloney.com. That's MargaretMeloni.com and join the community.
You've been listening to the Death Dhamma podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmaloney.com, MargaretMeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.